in the ancient kingdom of Judah, where the echoes of rebellion and idolatry filled the land. A young ruler named Asa rose to the throne. He was only 20. Yet his heart burned with a passion for righteousness that set him apart from the kings before him. While many had turned to false gods and empty rituals, Asa chose a different path, one of truth, courage, and faith. He walked through the ruined temples, saw the idols that had stolen his people's devotion, and made a bold decision. They had to go. One by the altars to foreign gods were torn down, the pagan shrines destroyed, and the land began to breathe again. For the first time in years, Judah found peace. The people looked to Asa with hope, believing that maybe, just maybe, their nation could return to its former glory under the guidance of a king who truly sought the will of God. Under Asa's leadership, justice was restored, worship was purified, and prosperity blossomed across the land. His early reign became a symbol of how faith and determination could rebuild a nation from the ashes of corruption. But like many great stories, this one would not remain golden forever. Behind the victories and blessings, seeds of pride and compromise were quietly taking root, waiting for their moment to grow. Before we uncover the rise and fall of King Asa, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapters of this powerful true story of faith, leadership, and redemption. The peace that King Asa brought to Judah seemed unshakable, a golden age born from faith and courage. But peace, as history often teaches, is never permanent. Word soon spread across the lands that an immense army from Ethiopia was marching toward Judah, an ocean of soldiers stretching farther than the eye could see. Their armor gleamed beneath the sun, their banners darkened the horizon, and their chariots thundered like an approaching storm. They came not only with the strength of men, but with the pride of conquerors who believed no kingdom could stand before them. For Asa, this moment was unlike any he had ever faced. The young king who had restored his nation now stood at the edge of ruin. The numbers alone were enough to break the courage of any ruler. Yet as his generals brought grim reports and his people trembled, Asa's heart turned not to fear but to faith. He did not summon foreign allies, nor did he rely on his own wisdom. Instead, he walked into the temple, the same temple he had cleansed years earlier, and fell to his knees. There, before the altar, he prayed not with the confidence of a warrior, but with the humility of a servant. His words were simple yet powerful. Lord, it is nothing for you to help. Whether with many or with few, we rest on you. For in your name we come against this multitude. It was not strategy or numbers that he sought, but divine strength. And in that prayer, Asa placed not only his army but his entire kingdom in God's hands. The following dawn broke with a strange calm over the valley. The Ethiopian forces assembled, confident that their sheer might would crush Judah within hours. But as the battle began, something unseen moved across the field. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Fear spread where pride had stood moments before. Asa's smaller army pressed forward, guided by a force beyond human explanation. What should have been a swift defeat turned into a sweeping victory. The invaders fled in chaos, leaving behind vast spoils and a story that would be told for generations. When Asa returned to Jerusalem, the people erupted in celebration. Their faith had been rewarded, their king vindicated, their nation preserved. Yet amid the joy, Asa's heart did not swell with pride. He knew the victory had not been his, it had been a gift, a reminder that power alone could not save a kingdom, but faith could. For years afterward, Judah prospered under his reign. The fields yielded in abundance, the borders stood secure, and the people walked in peace. Asa's name became synonymous with devotion and trust, and his story inspired countless others to turn their hearts toward what was eternal rather than temporary. But as time passed, the echoes of that miraculous victory began to fade. Success can be a gentle deceiver, whispering that faith once proven will always remain unshaken. For Asa, The memory of that triumph would stand as both his greatest blessing and his greatest test. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are not fought with swords and armies, but with the quiet struggles of the heart, where trust must once again rise above fear. In the quiet after victory, Judah basked in peace. The fields that had once trembled beneath the feet of armies now whispered with the sound of harvest. Families rebuilt what war had torn apart, and the songs of gratitude rose from villages across the hills. King Asa walked through his kingdom with a humble pride, knowing that faith, not numbers or strategy, had delivered them. Yet even in that serenity, a gentle warning stirred in his heart. Peace could make a nation forget the very power that had saved it. It was during this time that a prophet named Azariah came to him. The man's eyes carried the weight of truth, and his words pierced the air like a blade of light. As long as you seek the Lord, He will be with you. Azariah said, his voice steady, but if you abandon Him, He will abandon you. The message was both a promise and a warning, and Asa listened. He knew that victory had not been an end, it was a beginning. The battle may have secured their borders, but the hearts of the people still needed to be guarded. That night, Asa stood on the palace balcony, looking out over Jerusalem as the torches flickered below. He remembered the idols he had destroyed and the temples he had cleansed. Yet he sensed there was still more to be done. Faith was not a moment of triumph. It was a covenant renewed every day. Inspired by the prophet's words, Asa resolved to lead his people not just in worship, but in renewal, to rekindle their devotion and remind them of the vow between Gad and Judah. The call went out across the land, from the mountains of Ephraim to the valleys near the sea. Men and women journeyed to Jerusalem. Some came out of gratitude, others out of fear, but all came with hearts stirred by something greater than themselves. The city swelled with crowds as the sun climbed high, and the sound of trumpets filled the air. Asa stood before the multitude, his voice echoing across the square as he proclaimed a day of covenant renewal. There was no pageantry, no display of royal power, only a deep, collective yearning. The people knelt, confessing the sins that had divided them from their faith. Tears fell, hands were raised, and voices joined in a single promise that they would seek the Lord with all their hearts and all their souls. It was a moment unlike any other in Judah's history, a nation reborn not through conquest, but through conviction. The covenant ceremony lasted for hours, yet the spirit of it lingered for years. Families destroyed the remaining idols hidden in their homes. The priests restored sacred practices that had long been neglected, and even Asa's own household turned its heart toward righteousness. From that day forward, the kingdom entered a season of profound peace and prosperity. Asa often walked among his people in those years, watching children play in the streets and farmers rejoice over abundant crops. Each time, he remembered the prophet's voice and the promise it carried. He knew that faith had built their strength, and unity had preserved it. The revival sparked by Azariah's words became the heartbeat of Judah, a living reminder that nations, like people, are never truly safe unless their hearts remain steadfast. And so the years rolled by in grace and stability, with the land blooming under divine favor. Yet, as seasons change and hearts grow comfortable, even the most faithful can forget the fires that once purified them. For Asa, the true test of his devotion was yet to come, a test not of his sword, but of his soul. Years passed since the day Judah had renewed its covenant, and under Asa's rule the kingdom had flourished beyond imagination. Cities were fortified, trade routes expanded, and prosperity became the rhythm of daily life. Peace had been the air his people breathed for so long that the memory of battle seemed like a distant legend. Asa had grown older, wiser in the ways of governance, yet perhaps more confident in his own strength. The kingdom he had rebuilt through faith now stood as a symbol of stability, and few dared to challenge it. But as often happens when years of peace soften vigilance, a new threat began to stir, one not from distant lands, but from their northern neighbor, the kingdom of Israel. King Baasha of Israel, ambitious and restless, looked upon Judah's success with envy. Determined to strangle its trade and movement, he began constructing a fortress at Ramah, a strategic city near the border. With that single act, Judah's freedom was trapped like a bird in a cage. No merchants could pass, no travelers could move freely, and the once open roads of commerce turned silent. For the first time in many years, Asa faced a challenge that could undo all he had built. The man who had once fallen to his knees before battle now called his advisors to counsel. Their voices filled the chamber with plans and fears. Some urged patience, others demanded war. Asa listened, but deep inside, the quiet voice that had guided him through earlier trials seemed distant. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps wariness, but this time Asa did not seek the temple. Instead, his thoughts turned toward diplomacy, alliances, and strategy. North of Israel lay the kingdom of Aram, ruled by King Ben-Hadad, a man of great power and shifting loyalties. Asa decided to reach out to him, not with promises of faith, but with silver and gold. From the sacred treasury of the temple, he gathered the wealth once dedicated to God's service. Those treasures, shining with holy purpose, were now packed into chests and carried through the mountain passes to the Aramean court. It was an act of desperation cloaked in wisdom, a decision that spoke not of faith but of calculation. The plan worked, at least on the surface. Ben-Hadad accepted the bribe and turned his armies against Israel. Caught off guard, Baasha abandoned his fortress at Ramah to defend his northern borders. Judah seized the opportunity, dismantling the stronghold stone by stone. For a moment, Asa appeared victorious once again. The people praised his cleverness, his counselors admired his foresight, and peace seemed restored. Yet beneath the triumph, something vital had shifted. The same king who had once trusted in prayer now trusted in politics. The same hands that had lifted offerings to heaven now counted coins for earthly power. The victory, though swift, carried an unseen cost. In gaining relief from his enemy, Asa had traded something far greater: the unwavering faith that had defined his reign. In the silence that followed the campaign, as the celebrations faded and the torches dimmed, Asa must have felt the weight of that decision. The temple stood as it always had, but within its walls, the echoes of his earlier prayers no longer stirred his heart as before. Peace had been purchased, not granted. And though the borders of Judah remained safe for the moment, the foundation of its spiritual strength had begun to crack. The lesson was subtle but profound. When faith gives way to convenience, victories may come quickly, but they seldom endure. For Asa, the choice to trust in men rather than the divine would open a door he could never fully close, a door through which the shadows of pride and regret would soon enter his life. Not long after the walls of Ramah were dismantled and the people rejoiced in their reclaimed freedom, a visitor arrived at the palace gates. He was not a nobleman or a foreign envoy but a prophet, a man named Hanani, and known for his unwavering devotion and piercing words. He came without ceremony, carrying no gifts, no scrolls, only a message that burned within him like fire. Word of his arrival spread quickly through the court, and whispers followed him as he was led into the throne room where Asa sat, surrounded by his advisors and trophies of recent triumphs. The room fell silent as Hanani lifted his gaze to the king. His eyes, calm yet unyielding, met Asa's, and in that moment, every memory of past faith seemed to hang between them. Because you have relied on the king of Aram, and not on the Lord your God, Hanani declared, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from your hand. Were not the Ethiopians and Libyans a mighty army? Yet because you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hands. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. You have done foolishly, and from now on you will have wars. The words struck like thunder. In another time, Asa might have bowed his head in repentance, for he had once been a man quick to listen, humble in spirit. But now, age and power had changed him. The prophet's rebuke, though true, pierced his pride. The court watched in uneasy silence as the king's expression hardened. The same man who had once knelt in the temple now rose in anger, his voice echoing with wounded authority. To be corrected in the presence of his court was an affront he could not bear. Without hesitation, Asa ordered the guards to seize Hanani. The prophet was dragged away, his words still hanging in the air like an unbroken echo. No one dared to speak. The king who had once torn down idols now built walls within his own heart, imprisoning the very messenger who sought to bring him back to the truth. It was not just Hanani who suffered. Asa's wrath spread through the kingdom like a chill wind. Those who questioned his judgment, even gently, found themselves silenced or punished. Fear began to creep into the streets where faith had once flourished. The palace grew quieter in those days, the music less joyful, the laughter of servants replaced by whispers. The people still revered Asa, but the warmth that had defined his reign began to fade. The prophet's words, though suppressed, could not be forgotten. In the stillness of night, they must have echoed in Asa's mind, reminding him of the man he once was, the young king who had trusted in prayer. Not politics, but pride is a powerful companion, and Asa clung to it fiercely. He built new fortifications, strengthened his armies, and surrounded himself with those who spoke only what he wished to hear. Outwardly, Judah remained strong, but within, something sacred had fractured. The nation that had once been bound together by faith was now held together by fear. Hanani's prophecy lingered, not as a curse but as a truth unheeded. When a heart turns from trust to pride, even victory loses its meaning. Asa's kingdom would endure for a time, but the peace that once defined it was gone, replaced by unrest that no alliance could heal. The king who had once led his people in renewal now stood as a warning, a reminder that even the most faithful can falter when they trade humility for power. Asa's later years unfolded with a somber shadow that contrasted sharply with the brilliance of his early reign. The time when Judah had known peace and prosperity under a king devoted to God, once celebrated for his courage, wisdom, and steadfast faith, Asa now faced a trial that no army or alliance could overcome, a severe disease that weakened his body and challenged the spirit of his people. The same man who had knelt in prayer before battle, calling on God's protection against overwhelming enemies, now walked the corridors of his palace relying solely on the skill of physicians, ignoring the spiritual source that had guided him to victory in his youth. Those who observed Asa in these final years saw a king burdened not only by illness, but by the weight of choices that had steered him away from the faith that had once defined him. The once vibrant courts of Judah were quieter now, the echoes of worship replaced by the hum of concern over the king's failing health. Advisers and nobles whispered of the irony. A man who had once embodied trust in God now sought only human remedies, as though wisdom and power could replace the divine guidance that had brought him so far. The people could not help but remember the victories and reforms that had marked Asa's early rule, the purging of idols, the dedication of the nation to true worship, and the miraculous triumph over the Ethiopian army, and they mourned the spiritual distance that had grown between their king and the God he had once served with unwavering devotion. In the solitude of his final days, Asa's story became a powerful lesson. It was a reminder that even the most righteous beginnings cannot guarantee a faithful ending if one allows pride and human reliance to overshadow humility and trust in God. His illness, untreated by spiritual counsel, became a symbol of a deeper loss, the gradual fading of faith, the turning inward to human solutions when divine guidance was still within reach. Asa's life, full of promise and early triumphs, now closed with a quiet H, the glory of his accomplishments dimmed by the shadows of spiritual neglect. Yet Asa's story is not merely one of failure. It is a vivid illustration of the tension between human pride and divine reliance, a timeless caution for all who hear it. It calls us to reflect on our own paths, to consider where we might lean too heavily on our own understanding, and to remember that true strength often comes from surrender, humility, and faith. As the people of Judah laid their king to rest, they remembered both the victories and the regrets, the blessings and the lessons, carrying forward a legacy rich in insight for generations to come. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the life of Asa, a king whose story teaches us about the heights of faith and the consequences of pride. If you found this tale inspiring and thought-provoking, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that brings history to life in ways that resonate today. Your support helps us continue sharing these fascinating stories from the past, offering lessons that remain meaningful in our lives today.